Welcome to part 3 of the X570 ProArt build. Now this here is the absolutely insanely spec'd creator PC. If you haven't seen the part 1 and 2 or the 4th and 5th part, it's a 5-part series about this PC to make sure that you know exactly how this PC works, how to build it, what parts to change if you want to change anything. But in this video, part 3, we are checking out the Premiere Pro timeline performance. We're going to be looking through lots of different codecs from like mirrorless cameras from 4K all the way up to 12K to actually give you a very good example how this PC performs in Premiere Pro video editing performance. This video is sponsored by Artlist, which is also my go-to music and sound effects licensing site. Music license from Artlist is covered by a worldwide royalty-free license, which includes all projects from personal YouTube videos to high-end TV commercials. Once you've downloaded a song with active subscription, it's yours to keep forever. New music and sound effects are added to the site daily, so you'll never run out of choice. There's one affordable annual subscription cost with no hidden fees, and the best part is, if you sign up through the links in the description below, you'll get 2 months for free. So check out Artlist in the video description below. Just a quick side note, all the parts that I'm using in this build are linked in the description below, as well as the previous and upcoming parts of this video series. Let's start. Now this over here, where we're going to start is first of all some mirrorless camera codecs. Now it's not so much about the model of your mirrorless camera, but rather the subchroma sampling, the codec, whether it's H.264, 5, ProRes, B-RAW, and the frame rate. So if you're using a different brand of mirrorless camera, just find the actual same codec that you're using to see how this would play back. So we're starting with 8-bit 420 60 frames per second. And also we want to see like how well does it play back and how well does it work with hardware and what hardware part would works back. So at the moment we're using no color grading on it. The adjustment layer is unseen, as you can see, and the timeline performance is excellent, absolutely excellent. We're going to press play, we drop in 0 frames, plays back absolutely no problem. If we put on color grade as well, don't mind my color grade, it's just to show you that it's on, so it's obvious color grade on, and it's absolutely perfect as well. So if we see, this has been played by the GPU, so the RTX3090 is playing back this codec, and yeah, it's easy. So even with color grade on, it's absolutely no problem. Very, very instant, no lag at all. Now moving on to 10-bit 420, just to check if the bit depth has changed anything. But this is 24 frames per second, so not as much. But if we're playing it back, no problem at all. It all gets played back on the GPU, so it's hardware accelerated codec. No problem over there, absolutely fine. 0 frames dropped, don't need to see anymore, it's fantastic. Now this over here is 422, which now is software accelerated. So this gets played back on the CPU, as we can see. The GPU is not doing anything, but the CPU is doing all the work now. So as you can see, it's not so smooth anymore, but timeline click-through is still pretty instant. So this is the codec that I'm usually using from my 7S III, like what's coming from this angle. It's actually 25 frames per second. This is 24 frames per second, but it's fine. So if you press play, it plays it back, no problem. As you can see, the CPU is only 14–15%, so it's kind of like a breeze to you. Now it's not as smooth as like the previous codecs, just because it's not just that type of smooth codec. It's hard to edit back, but the PC has plenty of power to play it back. Now this is 422 30 frames per second, so a little bit more than previously, 6 frames per more. And to be honest, 30 frames per second is more smoother than 24 frames per second. It plays back super smooth. Like this is insane, absolutely instant. Full resolution as well, by the way. 10-bit 422, this is insane. This gets played back on the CPU as well, as you can see, and it's no problem. The bit on the GPU over here, that is actually the lumetri color over there that we're playing back, because the lumetri color is GPU accelerated. That's why the GPU is doing work. Now this is 60 frames per second, 422. It's H.264, so not H.265 yet, but still, this is not hardware accelerated. As you can see, it goes on the CPU, but let's just say it's still pretty good. It's not as smooth, but the timeline is pretty instant. Bear in mind, this is full resolution, and we've got a color grade on as well, and that's quite a hefty color grade here as well. There's 2 LUTs on, curves and everything, so just to stress the system, I am very, very happy with the timeline performance. Scrubbing is fine. Let's press play again. As you can see, we are even playing it back 60 frames per second, no frames dropped. That's insane. So let's click over here, press play. Full resolution, 422, 10-bit, 60 frames per second. It's insane. Like, it's not gonna get any better. This is as good as I've ever seen anything playback. Now here's 2 different types of codecs. So this is H.264, 422, 10-bit, but 25 frames per second over here on the left one. And then the right clip over here is SI, which means it's a bit less compressed than the H.264 on the left side. And this is quite smooth. So if you're using the A7S III and this is the SI codec that you're playing back, it's very high bit rate. You also get very smooth like timeline performance compared to this compressed codec that is much more choppier compared to this SI. But both of them, it's able to play back at full resolution, 0 frames dropped. As you can see, CPU is never been maxed out at the moment. It's absolutely fine. Okay, this over here is H.265 now, just to show you the H.265 timeline codec playback as well. It's 420, 4K, and it's 50 frames per second as well. Timeline performance, very good. Full resolution, we're playing back with a color grade. I'm very happy. We're gonna press play. That's very instant. And the CPU has plenty of, look at that. In fact, it's actually played back on the GPU because it's 420, H.265. That's very interesting. Plenty of power left, hardware accelerated codec this one is, because it's 420, and absolutely no problem, super happy. Moving on to Canon C200 RAW. So this is Canon RAW, 4K, it's DCI as well, 60 frames per second, Canon RAW as you can see. It's a very large file, so let's see what the timeline performance over here is. Bear in mind this is with the color grade on as well. Full resolution, Canon C200 RAW, 60 frames per second. To be honest, it's insanely smooth. There is no tearing, it's very, very smooth. Okay, there was a little something weirdness going on, not as much as on the Intel 12900K. So the timeline performance is much, much smoother with this over here. There is a little bit of tearing, but to be honest, I'd be very happy to just edit with this. So we're playing it back full resolution. It took a little time, but then it started dropping a few frames here and there with the color grade on. Let's see if anything is maxed out. Yeah, the CPU is absolutely maxed out to play this back. It's actually not too bad. It's not dropping any more frames. Let me start it again. Look at that. That is the full resolution now. Full 60 frames per second Canon C200 RAW. Full resolution, playing it back. The CPU is 100% utilized, but look at that. We're not dropping any frames. That is quite insane. That's with a color grade as well. That's ridiculous. That's seriously impressive actually. Even with the clip change over here, wow, seriously awesome. Let's see what the CPU temperatures are at 100% utilized. Look at that, 68 degrees. We're pulling 141 watts from the socket and it's no problem. Now that's what I call a serious workhorse of a CPU to play this codec back. This is amazing. Now this is Red RAW, 4K Red RAW. One of them is even DCI 4K, yes, DCI 4K, 30 frames per second and 24 frames per second. So first of all, 24 frames per second, look at that. It's smooth as butter. Does Betty like butter? And 30 frames per second, this is insanely smooth. Now this over here is an absolute nutcracker of a codec. And I'm not sure if this is gonna play it back. I mean, we're not dropping any frames at the moment, but this is Canon R5, H.265, 60 frames per second, 10-bit 422. Like, it's as hard as it can get to any codecs. Like, even 12 KB RAW is easier to play back than this one you'll see in a moment. I'm hoping that I'm right. But this is insane. What? CPU is even 70% utilized. It's not even 100% utilized. Okay, some of the cores are over here. This is insane. Wow. Now, if you haven't seen my 12900K playback with exactly the same codec, then go check it out, because the Intel one was so much more chopping. It was dropping frames. It couldn't quite do it. But this is like, this is insane. Okay, now I see why the 16 core actually is awesome, because it's 16, all of them performance cores. It's insane. Now this is with the color grade on as well. So let's take the color grade off, and it's much more smooth, okay? This is with a color grade. It's still, I mean, it's still insane. I mean, look at that. Okay, our CPU is much more utilized now, but this is insane. Let me put it to half the resolution, because I wouldn't, you know, edit this at full resolution. Not that much of a difference. Quarter of a resolution. Yeah, that's pretty smooth now, timeline performance. I mean, I'm super impressed about that. 5K red raw, let's have a look. Our CPU is 100% utilized. We are not dropping any frames, and we're in the 60s. Look, air cooling is awesome. By the way, I'm having the panel off not because of the airflow. The airflow would be pretty much the same with the panel on as well, but it's just very reflective. I want you to see inside the case because it's just beautiful. Red 5K, no problem at all. Timeline performance, super smooth as well. It's insane. Now this is red 6K raw. First of all, let's do timeline performance. This is full 6K red raw, by the way. So just to show you, it's 24 frames per second, 6.1K resolution at one way. It's pretty insane. Okay. And the timeline performance, wow. Now this is impressive. The CPU is probably 100% utilized, not even 100%. What, the GPU? How is this possible? How is it playing it back on the GPU? Is that what it's doing? No, it's on the CPU. Playing it back on the CPU, but look at that. This is insane. This is like a mini Threadripper, this monster over here. It plays it back so smooth. This is like the smoothest playback of any PC I've seen on this red 6K raw with the color grade on. Look at this. It's like almost instant. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's press play, and we're dropping no frames. Just a comparison over here, the 12900K wasn't as good as this one. The 12900K, after like 5K onwards, it started like just being ridiculous and couldn't really hack it. This one here, okay, we dropped one frame over there. Something, 7 frames, could have been an accident. Let's press play again. Okay, sometimes we're dropping frames and sometimes we aren't dropping frames. But this, see, 0 frames dropped. It's insane. Absolutely insane. Now, moving on things to another level. This is red 8K raw with a color grade. So first of all, we're gonna do a little timeline performance test, okay? There's no proxies over here. This is just literally full 8K, as you can see. 8K red raw, 24 frames per second. I mean, timeline performance, it's smoother than the Sony a7S III like 4K codec. It's insane to think that this is 8K red raw. Insane. Okay, there's a little bit of a, like a, what's it called, artifact going on over there. I'm not sure why this is over there. But look at this. I mean, this timeline playback is insane. Clicking through it, it's like instant. It's absolutely insane. Okay, now we see why the Ryzen 5950x is absolutely amazing at playing it back. Wow, look at this. Okay, let's press play and see what happens. Okay. 100%, no, actually, CPU is about 73% utilized. GPU here, quite utilized as well, but we're playing back red raw 8K, no frames dropped. It's pretty impressive. I mean, if you have an 8K editing workflow with Red RAW, honestly, I think this would do it no problem. I'm like scrubbing through and it like responds as fast as I'm moving the cursor. Okay, it's just insane. This over here is probably a little bit hard to play back. Let's see if we can do it. Full resolution, Canon R5 8K now, just to show you the exact codec over here as well. 30 frames per second, Canon Cinema RAW. This is the light codec with color grade, full resolution. Let's press play. Let's see what happens. Probably not gonna play it back. Yeah, didn't think so. This is quite something to play back at 8K. Look at our memory usage. 47, 48, 49, 50 gigabytes used, 52 gigs used. Oh, to play this back, this is insane. Okay, obviously full resolution doesn't work over here. Let's put it to half the resolution. Let's do timeline scrubbing. Okay, half the resolution, timeline scrubbing is very good. Just going back to full resolution. It's okay, but I wouldn't do it full resolution. There's no point. Half the resolution, it's perfect. This is very, very smooth now. No problem. Let me just press play, see if we can play it back half the resolution. Okay, it's still got some like issues a little bit playing it back. So it is dropping some frames, but it's like mostly smooth. Like few frames here and there. I'd probably edit it on quarter of a resolution because that's pretty smooth to me. Like now, plays back no problem. So put it on 1/4 of a resolution and you're fine. Last codec we're gonna try is 12K, okay? 12K B-RAW with a color grade, just pressing play. Let's see what happens. The PC is saying basically, no way, Jose. 56 gigs, 57 gigs used on the RAM. Okay, let's put this down to half the resolution because I don't know anyone who would play this back at full resolution 12K. Half the resolution. Wait a second, it was smooth. I just want to try it again. Okay, it's dropping some frames even at half the resolution. But do not, why would you use this at half the resolution? I'd put it on quarter and look at this timeline performance. This is insane. Let me try with half as well. Even with half, the timeline performance is pretty insane. I'll actually put it to quarter of the resolution. Look at that. That's amazing. 12K B-RAW, playing it back, and we've got plenty of power left. Now, probably if you're doing 8K plus editing, I would recommend you getting 2 more of the RAM sticks because just the RAM usage might be a little bit more than 64. You might be able to, this RAM configuration might be a bottleneck over there. Just get exactly the same ones in the description below. Just 2 sets of these and you'll be absolutely fine. So let's conclude then now, what did we see? This configuration here is as good as I have ever seen anything. Now you can go and see my Threadripper playback as well, the 24 core, processor on this, but I'd say this is like as good as this, if not even better, because it runs cooler, runs quieter, and it can do everything that the 24 core Threadripper did on live playback performance. 4K mirrorless camera codecs, it's just as good as it can get. Really good performance, especially if you put it on half the resolution, because I wouldn't like edit, like just cutting clips at full resolution, that's no problem. But if you want to see it at color grade, played back full resolution, no problem. Moving on to like 5K, 6K, 8K, it's ridiculous. Now, if you do like 6K plus editing, like I mentioned, I'd probably get 128 gigabytes of RAM. All the links are linked below if you want to pick any of this up or build this one. So basically, even 8K Red RAW if you want to edit it, or Canon 8K RAW if you want to edit it, it just does it. It's absolutely amazing. Now, if you haven't seen my Intel 12900K playback yet, go check that one out. But like now, when I've done it both, I can see that this 16 core is actually much better at playing it back these codecs like live. I tested the 12900K as well with DDR5 64 gigabytes. Honestly, this AMD is still just better. The live editing performance is just better, which I think is most important when we get to the video editing performance. So if I had to give it a rating, it's honestly like 10 out of 10, because it's just as good as it's gonna get. Like, I haven't seen anything better. Just having a look at the hardware now configuration as well, to see how did our hardware like handle this. Now in the room over here, we have 22.5 or 23 degrees at the moment, and we have 74°C max temperature. So that was like when it peaked over there, but it was still super quiet over there. This Noctua cooler can handle it very well. 142 watts maximum pulled from the socket. Our CPU hit more than 5 gigahertz in some of the cores, which is very impressive. And our GPU temperatures over here, the memory was 82 degrees. That's on the backplate over there. And because of the RTX 3090s, that is what is going to happen. The memory is always going to be the hottest. That's no problem over there. The memory can be like 110 degrees or something like that, I think. So you don't need to worry about that. The hotspot on the GPU was 71°C. It's quite all right as well. GPU, like usual temperature, was 60 degrees. Very happy with that. Hardware works super well. And this playback was very awesome as well. What can I say? I'm impressed. If you'd like me to include some of the other codecs for future testing on timeline testing, send me an email or drop me a comment in the description below, and maybe we can make this happen. We can add some of the other codecs if you want to see that as well. Likes if you enjoyed this video, subs if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Thanks guys for watching. Bye bye.